the other room hear me? All right, I see a thumbs up. Fantastic. All right. We are a little bit delayed, ladies and gentlemen, but we are going to go ahead and get started here. So what we are going to do is we have 3 items on the agenda here. The first item is House Bill 2326, which is the Precinct Committee mandatory reporting item. We will be skipping over that at this point in time. And so the first item that we will be considering is House Bill 2332. For an overview, the chair recognizes the reviser.
You are good. Jason, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 2332, if you remember, was the bill that amended the statute regarding applications for an advanced voting ballot to add a new subsection to require any person who solicits a registered voter to file an application for advanced voting ballot to include a clear label on the outside of the mailing in 14-point font or larger that has the name of the individual or organization sending the mailer, the name of their organization president or chief executive officer, the address, and a statement that the mailing is not a government mailing, but from a private individual or organization.
All right. So thank you, reviser. We are going to go ahead and go into the motions, and since this is Representative Topliker's bill, I will recognize Representative Topliker for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to pass House Bill 2332 favorably, and I do have some amendments, so I don't know if you want me to include those into the motion or...
No, we'll go ahead and take your motion, then we'll take your amendments. I do have a second from Representative Berquist. Representative Topliker, would you like to go ahead and start offering your amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There were several issues that came up under this bill, and I tried to address each one of them as best as I possibly could. I spoke with some of the people that had raised concerns, but I'll just go through. If I could get either one of the I think this is Reviser Long, if he could send the proposed amendment to the committee members, I'd appreciate that. If you don't already have it on your computer there, if Mr. Long could send that.
Representative, which amendment? My understanding is you have several balloon amendments and they're numbered.
Okay. I have 4 amendments, and one of them is balloon number 3, and it addresses the concern that county officials such as county clerks and maybe some election office staff that there may be a problem with, that may have had a problem with this bill, that it excludes those county election officials and the Secretary of State from the provisions of subsection K. And so they would not fall under the provisions of this bill. In other words, if you are a government agency, you are not required by this bill to do the disclosure that you are not a government agency, because you are. So we excluded them, and that's what this balloon number 3 does, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Committee, is there a second? Second from Representative Dodson. Discussion. All right, hold on. I cannot. I'm changing my layout here so I can try to see some other folks.
Can you see that?
No, I can scroll through it on my WebEx portal that I have over here. Okay, committee. I'm checking the folks online by scrolling through your images right now. I'm not seeing any Anybody with their hand raised? If you do, make sure to raise your hand virtually. All right. Let's see, is the other committee room? I cannot see the other committee room. There it is, okay. Folks in the other committee room, are there questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move balloon number 3 favorably.
Okay, all of those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment passes. Representative, you may continue.
Mr. Chairman, balloon number 4 clears up a question that I believe was asked by one of the representatives that had a question of what if someone mailed out a piece of mail and it did not include an advance ballot application, but only referred to it that it was available for people to get and fill out and request. And so this balloon number 4 clarifies that it only applies to mailings that actually include an application for an advance ballot. And so I would move that balloon, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I have a second from Representative Proctor. Committee, is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none. If you have discussion, I'm having a hard time seeing everybody, so just maybe chime in and I'll recognize you. If that ends up being the case, if I miss anybody by accident. All right, seeing no discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I have
Representative Neighbor.
one quick question here. Representative Tarwater, what is the purpose of this particular amendment? I guess my question is, if a candidate says you may apply for a mail-in ballot, and this is where you can go to do that, does that mean you have to put your name on it?
Mr. Chairman, no, that doesn't apply to any mailing that doesn't actually include an advanced ballot application.
Thank you for that clarification.
Committee, any further discussion? Representative Proctor.
To the previous representative's question, I think any mailing that you send would still have to have your name and your treasurer's disclosure until we repeal that requirement. It just wouldn't have to have the disclaimer about not being a government entity.
That would be on there anyway, but I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Committee, any further discussion? Hearing none, Representative, you may close.
Mr. Chairman, I close on balloon number 4.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Supervisor Long, can you stop sharing your screen real quick? Thank you. All right. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. The ayes have it. Balloon number 4 passes. Representative Topliker, you may continue.
The next balloon, Mr. Chairman, is number 5, which attempts to address the issue that Mr. Nichols brought to the committee, which he represented a disability group, and he was concerned that a 16-page document that he mails would have to have this disclosure on every single page. And so in balloon number 5, I addressed that well, it doesn't specify his, but it excludes any entity designated as a PAVA agency under the federal law and that is required to provide information on elections under the federal law. And that's what that does, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
So
just to
I
make
move
sure
that.
the committee is understanding what your amendment is, and then I'll ask for a second. So basically what this is that if someone is recognized by the federal government and the state of Kansas as helping those who are disabled or as under HAVA, then this will exempt them from this requirement, correct?
That is exactly right, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, I'm looking for a second. Representative Dodson is the second. Committee discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
The chair recognizes Representative Collins.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to mention that I also have a balloon amendment that pretty much does the same thing. So in lieu of my amendment, I will stand in support of Representative Topliker's amendment.
Fantastic. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. Representative, you may close.
Mr. Chairman, I move balloon number 5 favorably.
All right. Make sure, and those of you in the second room, make sure you mute your mics so it zooms out so I can see the entire committee room. Thank you. All those in favor,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, Brett Parker had his hand up for a question and he was not recognized. I'm sorry.
Okay, like I said a few minutes ago, I cannot see everybody due to some of the setup that we have going on today. So if I do not see you, please make sure to chime in so that you may be recognized. The representative did close on his motion, so I will have to go ahead and move forward, I think, at this point in time with the voting. Representative Parker, I'll call on you after the vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? Same sign. The ayes have it. Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to clarify a couple of things, but I think they're fine. Representative Topliker, I think you had kind of hinted at you spoke with the conferees about it. So with that last amendment, was that language that the Disability Rights Center okayed?
Representative Topliker.
Yes, that is correct. I did exchange some emails with Mr. Nichols, and I think we've got that cleared up, and he seems to be in agreement.
Great. And then, Mr. Chair, just very quickly, I think we might have a technical cleanup where multiple of these amendments have now carved out a section 2, and I want to make sure we didn't just undo the last one or the second amendment with the third amendment we just passed. So just wanted to flag that we might have to renumber accordingly.
We will run that technical cleanup type amendment, I think, once we kind of get through a few more of these amendments. Representative Topliker, do you have any more amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one more.
Continue.
Yes, I believe that it is balloon number 6, listed as number 6, and it is an amendment that addresses an issue that was brought up by Representative Miller that if this is passed, it has no teeth in it. There's nothing that says what the what the penalty is if someone were to just go ahead and keep sending these applications over and over again to an individual. And so what this attempts to do, Mr. Chairman, is it adds that a violation of this subsection is a Class C non-person misdemeanor. And basically what that would be similar to that I think we can all understand is it parallels a Class C non-person misdemeanor is equivalent to if we as candidates in our political door-to-door or mailers, I guess in this case it'd be mailers, if we were to not list the paid for by or the sponsored by statement on that political mailing, which we're required to under ethics laws. And so this parallels what the penalty would be if we were not to disclose that. And this penalty is a Class C non-person misdemeanor, which is up to 1 month in jail and or up to $500 fine, which is the same as it is for us. So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that balloon number 6.
Okay, committee, is there a second? The chair, nothing wrong. The second comes from Representative Dodson. Committee discussion. Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to request of the revisor's office or the committee staff, I would like to receive a digital copy of each of the balloon amendments, please, because I can't read these.
The committee secretary has been sending these to your email, so you should have been receiving these balloon amendments in your email.
Okay, so they're coming in right now, so I have to leave WebEx and go over.
It should be there's a tab at the bottom. All right, well, I'll have the committee assistant help you with that. We will now move to Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question's for the maker of the amendment, although if they need, and with your permission, if a revisor need to weigh in, that might be helpful. I was just curious, the enforcement for this, I mean, is this just going to be prosecuted by a district attorney, or would this kind of go before the Ethics Commission? Similar, I think Representative Topliker acknowledged, explained this is similar to the punishment for forgetting to put the paid for by. My understanding is in that instance, it would probably go before the Kansas Ethics Commission. So I just didn't know if this process would mirror that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that if I can.
Yes, proceed, Revisor Heim. Thank you.
The Ethics Commission doesn't have criminal prosecution authority, so it would have to go to the county or district attorney. They may have some kind of rule or regulation that they would bring them before for this, but the criminal prosecutions are done by county or district attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my concern with this is it seems like other violations within some of these practices in the election law that Ethics Commission has the ability to sort of waive, fines for a first-time offense if it's done merely by accident. I have a little bit of discomfort if an organization is doing this, not trying to confuse things, but actually in good faith, that they might not know that this becomes law and suddenly someone is liable to up to a month of jail time for, even if they are causing some confusion, well-intentioned attempt to get folks to vote. Yeah, that part's just a little bit trickier for me. I think my preference would be if there was a way to structure it to go before the Ethics Commission, that would certainly be my preference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, Representative, you may close.
Mr. Chairman, we have other areas of our law that the district attorney or county attorney would prosecute crimes that have to do with election law. And one that I can think of is if a candidate was to lie that they lived in a certain residence within a district and applied as a candidate to run for office in a district in which they didn't live, that usually that the district attorney or county attorney would be the prosecuting entity that would handle that election type case. And so I want to go ahead and move forward because I don't think that there's any simple answer other than what I've offered here. And I'd like to go ahead and move the motion.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion to amend by Representative Topliker. Those who are in favor, please. Yeah, Representative Dodson was the second, yes. So all those in favor, please raise your right hand. For those in the other room, please wave your hands like you just don't care. All right, thank you. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. All right, the opinion is the ayes have it. Okay, committee, Representative Topliker, is that the end of your amendments?
That is the end of my amendments, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, thank you, Representative Topliker. Committee, I have an amendment. It'll be balloon number 7. So I will explain my amendment. Basically what this is doing is, in my opinion, those who are outside the state of Kansas should not be sending advance mail ballot applications to residents inside the state of Kansas. And so what this amendment does is basically says no person shall mail an application for an advanced voting ballot unless such person is a resident of the state of Kansas or is otherwise domiciled in this state. Now, according to the revisers, just let me look it up real quick. According to the revisers, they indicated to me that the language for in statute with domiciled refers to an organization. So if an organization is domiciled picks up organizations. That's basically what that means. And I can call on the revisers for further clarification if needed. Sub-bullet point 2 kind of comes back to what Mr. Parker was talking about as far as enforcement and who's going to do that. In this item, I put the Attorney General down because it's coming from out of state. In my opinion, the best person to handle something like that would be the Attorney General in order to enforce this provision. For each violation of an advanced voting ballot that is sent to a Kansan, it'll be a $20 civil penalty for each ballot sent. So if someone sends 500 ballots into the state of Kansas and they originated from outside of our borders, that would be a total of a $10,000 fine. So basically 20 times 1, 20 times whatever. And that's how that fine was created. And then I also moved the enactment date out to January 1st of 2022 to make sure that all of our county election officers have time to make sure they get the proper training required. I did talk to the Secretary of State about this kind of a conceptual idea, and they said that they would like to have some time in order to train their staff on if they start receiving a bunch of advanced ballot applications that they are receiving from outside the state. So with that, committee, I will look for a second. The chair gets a second from Representative Dodson. Is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the amendment that we just passed from the previous representative, the carrier of the bill, does that conflict with this $20 penalty, for instance?
It does not, because the representative the amendment we just passed, and the revisor can correct me if I'm wrong, The amendment we just passed is in regards to the disclosure and 14 size font on the envelope and that sort of thing. So if they send it within inside the state of Kansas, that Class C misdemeanor will apply to whoever sends it from inside the state of Kansas. What this is doing is indicating to states or people from outside the state of Kansas that if you do send advance mail ballot applications to our residents, that is a violation. We do not want you tampering or interfering inside of our elections. Is there further discussion? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where, upon adoption of your amendment, where does that leave political, in-state, state committee, and county political parties?
This amendment does not ban those individuals from sending those items, and my understanding is that the underlying bill does not either.
Thank you.
Representative Bishop.
Would this also apply to where it was printed?
Can you please clarify?
If it happens to have been printed in, say, Kansas City, Missouri, would it run afoul of this section?
This section says that it has to be mailed from inside the state. So if they print it in Missouri and mail it from Kansas, then
Well,
it would not run afoul of this statute if it
a lot of
comes
times
along.
with a printing job, you're doing the whole thing. Addresses, printing, mailing, and so forth.
Well, this is not in regards to political mail. This is not political mailers or anything like that. This is in regard strictly to advanced ballot applications.
Okay, but I'm not explaining this well. Let's say I'm a citizen of the state of Kansas, and I send material to a printer in Kansas City, Missouri, to print it, send it to, do the addressing and mail it. Is that a problem?
My understanding is that if they were to print it and then truck it over to the Kansas side of the line and give it to a mail facility there, we wouldn't have any problems.
How would that be proved?
Well, that is up to the Attorney General's office to be able to prove that where that mail came from.
So processing a printing job in the state of Missouri right across the line could possibly be a problem if the whole job were finished and it was mailed in Missouri.
Well, my question is do you often do advanced mail ballot application printing jobs in Missouri?
Someone in Johnson County might.
Then I would encourage them to make sure that they send it from inside the state of Kansas. Thank you. Further discussion, Representative Dodson.
Just real quickly, you said domicile. I want to make sure I understand that. So if some of these organizations have little offices in multiple states, or maybe they just work out of a house. So when we say domicile, does that say small office that happens to be a member of a larger organization situated in Kansas count in this? In other words, would they be authorized or not authorized?
Supervisor Long, could you help give us a little bit of insight on domiciled and how this language would impact those entities that might have smaller satellite offices or what have you here in the state of Kansas?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, oftentimes in statutes, when the word domiciled is used in connection with an organization, it's also used as alternatively with the principal place of business of the business being in the state of Kansas. And so I think there would be a good argument for the Attorney General that a satellite office of an organization located in Kansas would not be a principal place of business, and the organization would not be domiciled in the state if its primary principal place of business was, say, located in Missouri.
Representative Miller?
I was just going to try to clarify Representative Bishop's concern. The way I read this language, it doesn't have anything to do with where it's mailed. It has to do with the person mailing it. They're the ones that have to reside in the state. They can mail it from anywhere they want. Thank you.
correct. That's my understanding as well. You can print it in some other state, but mail it from inside the state of Kansas if you wanted. No?
You can mail it from outside the state of Kansas. You just can't be a resident outside the state of Kansas mailing it. It says, no person shall mail an application for an advance voting ballot unless such person is a resident of the state or is otherwise domiciled. It doesn't, there's no restriction on where they mail it. The restriction is on the mailer.
Do you see that now? And Revisor Long, is that interpretation correct?
Yes, the qualifier is the state in which the person resides or is domiciled, not the location where the application is actually mailed from.
Fantastic. Thank you, Representative Miller and Revisor Long, for that clarification. Chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to belabor the point, but is the mailer the person who places it in the mail or the entity that pays for the mail to be printed and mailed?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, so let's use the example I think Representative Bishop brought up. If a campaign, right, a non-government entity, but based in the state of Kansas, is the party paying for the mail? But ultimately, when I've done campaign mailers, whether they're applications for advanced ballots or just postcards, I, as the candidate, my organization is not physically putting anything in the mail. We are hiring a design firm or a mail firm. So is the assumption that the person who must reside and be a resident of the state is the one paying for the mail?
Revisor Long, I'm going to call on you again to see if we might need to add some clarifying language, or if you think this is sufficient enough to say that if I am the person paying for it as a resident of this state, that it is acceptable for that to be sent if it is indeed coming from out of state, say from Missouri.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the language might need to be tweaked so that it would be no person shall cause an application for an advance voting ballot to be mailed unless such person is a resident of the state or otherwise domiciled in the state. That would get to the person or entity actually directing the mailing of the application, which I think would address Representative Parker's question about who's causing the mailing versus who was actually doing, putting it in the post office box.
Okay, Representative Parker, do you wish to continue?
That was it, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that point because I think that probably gets closer to your intent. Thank you.
Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would oppose changing the language in that way because I think it creates a huge loophole for outside agencies and outside organizations to interfere with our elections by sending in advanced ballot requests. So I think that the language, the way it is, it might restrict you from contracting with some agency outside the state, but I personally would like to see more business in Kansas anyways.
Great point, Representative. Thank you. I'm just making sure the image is really, really small for the other room, so I don't know if anybody has had their hand up. So, but I will call on Representative Parker and then Representative Neighbor after.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the last comment. I understand, I think, the intent that Representative Proctor is speaking to, but I think this actually causes the opposite. If you leave it this way, there's the possibility of a loophole where an out-of-state entity that would be footing the bill would merely have to contract with a printer and mail shop within the state of Kansas. And in that instance, they would be accessing a loophole, whereas the language that Revisor Long suggested, I think, would close that and make sure that the entity actually providing the funding, causing the mail to happen would have to be a resident or an organization domiciled in Kansas. Just wanted to put that out there. I want to make sure we're not opening. I understand the intent to try and close that loophole. We don't want an organization to be able to skirt this if that's not the intention of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Your representative, I will say that it is always fantastic when we can encourage people to use Kansas businesses. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is, what is the reason for this bill in particular? And give me some examples of what's been done that's not been legal, or what is this really supposed to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. This came up in our discussion when we discussed this bill. The representative had the base language as an informational type bill to our constituents. However, in my opinion, it did not address the voter confusion that was happening this last election cycle, where people would get 6 or 7 different advanced mailing ballot applications. All of those, in my instance and circumstance that I had experience with, came from a different state that shall not be named at this point in time. But I think that we need to try to drive down less voter confusion, and it also makes it to where somebody doesn't start filling out 5 or 6 different applications and sending those to the election office and bogging them down even further, because they think that they've got it in, but they don't know, because they keep getting additional mail-in ballot applications. And so those are the various reasons why I think we do need to address those items. But additionally, I don't think that we should have outside entities who are sending possibly improper ballot applications to our residents because they are not understanding our laws or not doing things properly. And so I think that those who are residing within the state of Kansas, they play by our rules. They have the ability to play by our rules. And I think that that will allow for less voter confusion going forward. And so that is basically the reason why I am bringing this amendment. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, but again, the problem was in another state and not here. And my interpretation of how the election went from our Secretary of State was that there were no problems, and he felt it was one of the smoothest elections that we have had. And coming from a county that is large, I found it to be quite a bit easier this year. It wasn't complicated. And I don't know whether this complicates it or creates a problem that creates an answer to where there was no problem originally. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. I will respectfully disagree with you. And the Secretary of State did stand in here in our committee, I believe, earlier this session and say that there were quite a few ballots coming from out of state. And I have talked to their office about this issue, and they did not provide me with this type of solution or anything. They had nothing to do with it. However, they have recognized that there is a problem that does lead to voter confusion. I even heard of a story where the Secretary of State, from his office, the Secretary of State was down at an event in Wichita where an elderly woman came up to him basically on the verge of tears because she had an advanced ballot application. It was like her 6th or 7th one. And he had to just say, okay, you know, let's use this as a training. These are not sent out by the government. These are not our ballot applications. If you get these, throw them away. So I will say that this was an issue this past election cycle, and I think it does need to be addressed. The chair will recognize Representative Miller.
Yes, I stand in support of those remarks. And it may not have been a problem in every part of the state, but it was certainly a problem here in Shawnee County. And yes, this is the one area that the Secretary of State did say we needed to address. I will correct you, he did not stand before us, he was on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I believe Representative Proctor had his hand up next. Nope. Okay, Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is a non-solution for a non-problem. I could agree that just basically requiring that someone put a notice that this is not coming from a government agency, that makes sense. I mean, I get things in the mail all the time that purport to be from the Social Security Administration or from Medicare that aren't, and that are trying to sell me a directory of some kind or whatever. So that's not unusual. I had no complaints. If anything, it was just kind of a joke. Oh, I got another one of those. I think this is respectfully kind of silly.
Thank you, Representative. While it may have been a joke to you, it's not a joke to, I think, a lot of our constituents. And so it did cause a lot of confusion, and I think that that is something that we should address because it's not a joking matter. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll diverge a little bit from some of my colleagues. I do think we're trying to address a real problem. My fear is the more and more we amend this today, and I know we're up against a deadline, the further we get from what we had a hearing on. And I fear we're getting pretty far off here. And then there's a chance when this hits the floor, I mean, we've seen election bills before, this could be amendable to all sorts of things that folks want to litigate on the floor. And I do think there's a real issue we're trying to solve here. So I realize I'm not likely to prevail here, but I'd respectfully ask if we couldn't hold off on this, ask for it to be blessed, continue to discuss this, or perhaps even look at an interim committee where we really allow the Secretary of State's office, who I agree, they did point to this as one of the specific things to look at, and maybe some of the county election officials to really weigh in. Again, I think we're getting at a real challenge to solve here. I just want to make sure that we do it with some consensus and we don't just get too far off the rails here or invite getting too far off the rails when this hits the floor. So I'm not offering a substitute motion. I just would leave that for the chair's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. As you pointed out, this is the last day that we have available to us. And so at this point in time, we will be going ahead and trudging forward. I would like for the committee members to continue to have conversations even after we hopefully pass this out. With the amendments that we've added, I think it's still a good bill that we have here in front of us. And so if there are items that we can still discuss and talk about, then I think that we can try to address those as we get to the floor. Especially if we can come to some sort of compromise or agreement on something. If not, then I guess we will have this larger conversation when we get to the floor. So thank you, sir. All right, are there any other comments on the amendment? Representative Bourgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I acknowledge that there is an issue and that we need to address it, and I appreciate what this bill is attempting to do. And I also would say that I think for us state candidates, House candidates, state Senate candidates, certainly what we're doing here is doable. I am struggling a little bit with how this might affect some of our candidates in the campaigns for federal office when they're functioning and their campaigns are much more involved. So I wondered if you could speak to that and if you think that there are implications here and if they could comply.
Well, I think that they could comply with what we have here currently in front of us, especially, using Kansas businesses, I think is always a great idea, like I alluded to earlier. So if it is an issue, then I think that is something that we can definitely address. However, at this point in time, I have not been told that it is an issue at this current point. Would you like to follow up?
Not at this point. I'm still struggling with it a little bit. Doesn't mean I won't support the amendment and the underlying bill.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lee Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also really like this amendment. I think that it's definitely something that we need to address. I wanted to go back to a conversation we'd had several minutes ago. I agreed with Representative Parker, in terms of no person shall mail an application, I think that there is definitely a loophole there. You could be an entity outside of the state, hire someone in the state just to mail the application. So I wonder if it couldn't be something where not only are we addressing the person who's mailing it, but the entity that is also paying for it, the entity that's mailing it. Because I really do think there's a loophole there that someone could just say, we'll pay a Kansas resident to do this for us.
Was there a question there, or was that a statement?
No, the question is, can we change before we vote on this, can there be some verbiage that would also deal with the person mailing and the person paying for the actual mailer, the ballot?
So what I will say is, let's go ahead and dispose of the current question so that we don't start getting into substitute amendments, because I've seen where that rabbit hole goes, and there was one time where I was in a committee and we had 3 substitute amendments upon substitute amendment. So just to keep this as clean as possible, I would encourage us to vote on the underlying amendment currently, and then come back in with a conceptual amendment, because I'm guessing nobody has anything drafted yet, on how we might want to clean that up. The chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Mr. Chair, I will stand down until after we pass this amendment, and then I'll recommend a conceptual amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Toplicker.
I think this balloon still allows for any outside person or entity in any other state to send mail into Kansas. They just cannot include an advance voting ballot application. Isn't that your intention, Mr. Chairman? I think that's what this does.
That is what the bill says.
Thank you.
I guess that's what the amendment says. Apologies. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will go ahead and close on my amendment. All of those, and I move the amendment. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. By my count, the ayes have it. Motion passes. It's amended. Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move an amendment conceptually. In your balloon, it says no person shall mail an application. I would like to insert after mail or cause to be mailed. I think that'll plug the hole that we're talking about.
No person shall mail or what? Caused to be mailed. Okay. Did the reviser get that thumbs up if you got that? Okay, fantastic. All right, is there a second on that amendment? Chair, the second is from Representative Berquist. Discussion. Seeing no discussion or hearing no discussion, Representative, you may move your amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I close on my amendment.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. The ayes have it. Amendment passes. The chair recognizes Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment. It would be Miller 73. No, I think this one's Miller number 1.
All right. Representative, would you like to explain your amendment while we wait?
I'd be happy to. The committee may recall when we were having a hearing on this bill, I posed a question to County Clerk Pipo about permanent ballot applications, which currently can only be applied for by people who have a, quote, permanent illness or disability, unquote. I mailed out to my constituents in this last election cycle a letter asking them if they would like to vote at home and gave my number to call if they were interested so that I could sort out what kind of application they wanted. When they called, I would ask them question number one, are you interested in voting in advance in this next election, or is that something you'd be interested in doing every election? And for those that said every election, I then had to follow up and inquire what might be their illness or disability. And in that process, I ended up of, I think, about 300 people that responded to that particular mailer. 2/3 of them ended up qualifying, and we applied for a permanent advance ballot. My question of the county clerk was, would it be better for you from an efficiency standpoint if those people who were interested in voting advance or by mail every election, if they were simply able to do that when they applied? And he said absolutely. They would, the clerks, he was speaking on behalf of the association, said they would prefer that. And it, to me, a lot of people get confused when they vote, and that's one of the reasons I wanted them to call me, because a lot of people believe when they apply once to vote in advance, that covers them for the next election, and they don't bother to reapply because they're under the impression that having done it, they're going to be set up. This would allow anyone that wanted to vote every election to simply, on their application, make that option. And again, I don't see why we don't offer that to everyone, particularly in this day and age. So that's, I hope, the accurate description of my amendment that should have arrived.
It appears so. It's quite shorter than some of the other ones we've considered today. So is there a second for the amendment? Second from Representative Bishop. Committee, is there discussion? Chair recognizes Representative Berquist.
Mr. Chair, I believe that the amendment brings clarity to some people, and I think it muddies this bill. I won't be opposing it.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just echo some of the comments Representative Miller made. I don't have the same get out the vote effort that I think he has in his campaigns, but I will say that as I've gone door to door, this is something I've been asked about consistently by voters who are tired of filling out the same form, and again have heard from the clerks. And not only did they answer Representative Miller's question that way, they actually filed a bill to do just this last year in the Senate. So I do think this is something that would save a lot of red tape for our clerks and make their life a little bit easier, in addition to helping clarify things for some of the voters who have been wanting to do this, but continue to have to fill out those applications over and over and burden the clerks with extra paperwork. So I would support this amendment. Oh, I guess the last thing I would mention is we have passed this, a similar amendment out of this committee. I can't remember if it was the last biennium or the one before, but this is something this committee has considered before and adopted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I do not recall the committee adopting such an amendment in previous years. That does not sound right, but I will be talking to research about that. Representative Parker.
I was just going to clarify, I believe it was offered by Representative Good in 2018, if that helps on the research. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Representative Toplicker.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question about this, and I don't know if it goes to the reviser or Representative Miller. So this kind of allows any and all voters to be a permanent advanced voter. Is that not what your amendment does? Yes, if they choose to do so. So, Mr. Chairman, everyone then can be, my whole district could be a permanent advanced, everyone could be permanent advanced voting, could do that and would get a ballot then. I believe that's what this does. And my question is to the reviser, why doesn't current law do this now, or what is the reason why we have a special list, I guess, in,
Representative, I will
okay,
not permit that to go to the reviser at this time.
all right, okay.
So basically, I think that, well, I have a few questions of myself for the carrier. So if I may, Representative, then I will proceed. Okay.
Thank you.
So Representative Miller, so I have houses in my district where there's a lot of turnover. And there, I'll walk past a house and on my list, I'll have 5 different last names on there, or 10 different last names on there, or there's mismatch, what have you, and it's a high turnover house. So if the problem is they haven't updated their voter registration and they've all applied for an advanced ballot, now we're gonna have 10 advanced ballots show up at that house and nobody requested them because they've since moved on. So is that something that you've considered?
Yes, because I understand specifically how those mailers go out, and they say if they're undeliverable, they're to be, and they say do not forward. And if they're undeliverable, it actually gives the clerk or election office a heads up that that person is no longer qualified to vote. But contrary to popular belief, those ballots do not get into anyone's hands if that person is not still receiving mail at that address.
So I do live in an apartment complex.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I still receive a bunch of mail from a lot of people who are no longer living there, and I've been there for an entire year. And so the problem that I have with that is that we're hoping that the mail service, God bless them, but sometimes they're human too. And quite frankly, the problem that I have is if those ballots show up to someone's house and they're not very ethical, and they go ahead and sign. Now, granted, we have the people who try to verify the signatures and everything else, and it is a felony if they do that. They're breaking the law. However, I believe that it is very tempting for some people to possibly want to do that to influence the outcome of an election. So that's just where I'm at right now.
May I respond?
You may respond, sir.
Mail gets delivered differently. You quite likely, I get mail from people who lived at my residence years before, but I do not receive mail that says do not forward, return to sender. There's a different way to mail things, and the county clerk, the county election offices mail it out with those conditions on it. Do not forward. Do not deliver if addressee is unknown, whatever the language is, but it comes back. And if you get a ballot delivered to your house that belongs to somebody else, I'd like to know about it because it does not happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Proctor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Confidence in the integrity of our elections is fundamental to our way of life and our way of government. And I feel like a big part of the reason that confidence has been eroded is because election days turned into election month, and the proliferation of mail-in ballots has created suspicion that that malfeasance is going on with our elections, especially when returns don't come back for days. And so I will stand in opposition to this amendment because I think it goes in the exactly wrong direction towards more, later election returns and less confidence in our elections.
Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chair?
Representative Leon.
My question is, what if someone has passed away and this advanced ballot just keeps going to their home? I guess I don't know the protocol in terms of when the election board is notified that someone has passed away. When would that ballot stop going to that residence? How would they know? And maybe that is directed toward Representative Miller.
Representative Miller, if you would, I think the Secretary of State's office, are they online, Dana?
Yes, we are, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we do have the Secretary of State's office here on, if they could provide some details on how you guys scrub your list after people pass, unless Representative Miller, you would like to take a stab at an answer.
I can only answer for my county. But in my county, my election commissioner is very good at scouring death notices and removing immediately any voter. And understand, people get a ballot every election now if they're on the permanent list. I'm not talking about changing any of that. My amendment simply opens the avenue of getting a ballot every election without applying for it. Every situation we've had described here can occur today. It's just that the person has to keep applying every single election, as opposed to those that are on the permanent list. And I want to hearken back to my data that I gave earlier. 2/3 of the people that I heard back from that one mailer, 2/3 of them qualified for a permanent ballot anyway. And if I may address a question that was raised earlier about the original intent, when we first adopted, and pardon me for being older than most of you, but I recall when we first had the law on advance ballots, and it was written restrictively because it was new. We had not yet had our experience with it, and so it was narrowly written to only apply to people with permanent disabilities and illnesses. But that was more years ago than I want to say for the record. And we, again, I'm going to speak more for my county than anything because I am very familiar with my county. We do not have problems with mail ballots. We have rumors, but we don't have problems. And if my election commissioner was standing here, I think he'd back me up on that. It's a very well-run system. And I'm not attempting to muddy the water on this bill. I appreciate the amendments that have been made to this bill to improve it. I said the other day that I recognized there was an issue here, and I appreciate that Representative Toplicker had made the effort to introduce a bill. And I don't think it's a bad thing that it needed several amendments that addressed several concerns that were raised. We've made this bill a lot better. I'm not trying by this amendment to muddy the water. I actually am trying to boost its chances of passage, because with this amendment, I think it will attract a lot more affirmative votes when it goes up on the board for final action. That was close to a closing, wasn't it?
It was. So, real quickly, Mr. Barker, if you could, just how does the Secretary of State's office scrub the list of voters who have since passed away?
Mr. Chair, there's three things that the county election officers do. First, they're required to scrub obituaries and look for individuals that have died and to make sure they come off the voter rolls. Once a week, we get a report from KDHE of anyone who's died in Kansas and has a death certificate issued, and those individuals will automatically come off the voter registration list. I mean, it happens so fast, it's surprising sometimes. And third, once a year, we do a comparison of the voter registration list with the National Social Security Death Index, which occasionally will find people that died outside the state that we were unaware of that are still on the registration list. But it's a fairly automatic and data-intensive process to continually update the records for death. And that's required by federal law, the National Voter Registration Act.
Thank you for the additional information. The chair recognizes Representative Toplicker.
Just looking at the bill and the amendment, proposed amendment, I was looking at the attachment A and wondered if the representative, the maker of the motion, could say anything about that.
I would defer to the reviser. I think it's pretty much currently prescribed, but I don't know that for certain.
Revisor Heim or Long?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, attachment A is simply conforming an amendment to go along with the amendment in the balloon. This is the statute with the application for an advanced voting ballot. and it strikes language down in subsection C referring to the character of the illness or disability. And since that is no longer a qualifying requirement under this amendment, that's being stricken and replaced with more general language there. It's just a conforming amendment.
Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Miller made my point.
Representative Berquist.
My concern is based on what evidence I've seen, even in my time of living in different places in Kansas. I lived in a small town that really remained nameless because I don't want to intimidate or implicate. I went there to campaign for somebody that's ran there. And when I went to my old neighborhood that I lived in 35 years ago, I was surprised and excited to go and visit two people who lived in my neighborhood with me. And I went to the door and asked for that person. They said, "We don't know who you're talking about." And found out that they moved out just right after I did. And they're still on the voter registry list for that house. Two people in a community of only 11 homes. And that's my concern, is the amount of things that continue to come to somewhere without cleaning the records, whether they've died or whether they've moved. And I don't want to have a continuous stream of things going. That's why I think this bill takes care of a number of things, but that it might not be appropriate for that. Thank you very much.
Committee, is there further discussion on the Miller amendment? Hearing none. Representative Miller, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I abused my opportunity a little while ago and did most of my closing, but I do want to respond just to that final comment. It's my belief, I respectfully disagree. This, I believe, actually assists the clerk's offices in cleaning up the list, because when that ballot gets returned, they can remove those people from the red. I do understand that the names stay on the list sometimes for years because there's no provoking event to remove them. This would be such a provoking event. And again, I asked the pertinent person about this issue when we were having the hearing, and the pertinent person was the elected official representing elected officials himself, and he said it would help them, it would assist them if we set it up this way. I appreciate the committee's tolerance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing your amendment. All those who are in favor, please raise your right hand and keep them in the air. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. By my count, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Motion fails. Representative, the floor is still yours.
The ayes have it, it passes.
Sorry, I apologize. The nays have it, motion fails.
And I would request a division.
Division has been called for. All those who are in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. By my count, it is 6-6. The chair breaks the tie and votes nay. Motion fails. Representative Miller, do you wish to have the floor?
No, but I do want to report that I lost on a tie yesterday in this very room. We need a new room.
I can ask the speaker to change our rooms if you'd like. Okay, committee, is there further discussion on House Bill 2332? Seeing no further discussion, Representative Berquist, I believe, made the original motion. Would you like to renew your motion and as amended?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Revisor Long.
I just asked the committee also approve the revisor to make the technical edits necessary to merge the amendments adopted by the committee.
All right, so committee, the revisor's asking for some leeway on the numbering and everything else as far as technical amendments. I'm going to make that motion. Is there a second? Second from Representative Proctor. All those in favor, please raise your right hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it. Technical amendments are permitted. Thank you, Revisor Long, for bringing that to our attention. All right, Representative Berquist.
Yes, sir. I moved my motion to approve, and that would be as amended.
I'm going to have you please state the bill number.
Bill number for House Bill 2332.
Can you just go ahead and make the whole motion for me, please? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out HB 2332 favorable as amended with technical amendments.
All right, is there a second? Second from Representative Dodson. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your right hand. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. House Bill 2332 passes out. Committee, we are at 5 o'clock. However, I think that we should be able to dispose of it pretty quickly. So with that, we're going to go ahead and do House Bill 2339. So please shift your focus to that bill. Revisor Heim or Revisor Long, if you could please give us an overview.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a bill that amends the crime of election tampering to basically clarify and maybe extend the coverage of this crime. The bill would add changing or attempting to change, alter, or conceal any vote cast by paper ballot or computer, changing or attempting to change any vote by manipulating computer hardware or software, vote tabulation methods, or intentionally producing false vote totals.
Thank you, Revisor. This is Representative Topliker's bill. Representative, would you like to make the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move House Bill 2339 favorable for passage, and I do have 4 short balloon amendments that I think the committee members should have.
I do not believe that has been distributed to the committee yet, but you've heard the motion to pass out favorably. Is there a second? Representative Dodson is the second. Representative Topliker, if you would like to go ahead and introduce your amendment.
Mr. Chairman, the
Mr. Chairman,
committee,
if I could get the committee secretary to send out the amendment, that would be good.
Fantastic. Representative Topliker, if you'd like to go ahead and explain your amendment while that's getting sent out.
okay, I will. These are fairly simple change, 6-word statement while being charged with no election duty. Some of the committee members were a little bit not sure what that meant, so we've made that say that election tampering is making or changing any election record unless and here's what we added, unless the person is lawfully carrying out an election duty. So that there are some times when clerks and election workers need to, under the law, change records for one reason or another, or destroy records. This says unless the person is lawfully carrying out an election duty. So, in other words, it doesn't apply to them. Number 2, we added the word destroy, so that tampering is changing or attempting to change, alter, destroy. We added that word. And then it says, or conceal any vote cast by paper ballot. And then we added the word, as suggested in committee, by one of the members, election machine. So we added that word. And then when you go down to number 3, we added where it says in the bill, changing or attempting to change any vote by manipulating computer hardware, computer software. After that, we added election machine, again, wireless or cellular transmission. So we added those words. And then it continues on and reads, or vote tabulation methods. And then number 4 is or intentionally producing false vote totals. So those are the amendments, Mr. Chair, and I'm offering them all in one motion.
Thank you. I believe we all received it as one amendment, one motion. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I have it all in one. So is there discussion on the amendment? Seeing no discussion, Representative, you may close.
Mr. Chairman, I close.
All right. On the Topliker amendment, all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. The ayes have it. Committee, is there further discussion on the bill, 2339? Seeing no further discussion, Representative Topliker, would you like to renew your motion? As amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move House Bill 2339 favorable for passage as amended.
Is there a second? Second from Representative Dodson. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. The ayes have it. House Bill 2339 passes as amended. Body, thank you so much for all of your participation here as we head into turnaround. We will be on the floor all next week, so we will not be meeting. I appreciate all of the input from the committee members so far this session. I look forward to working with you some more after turnaround, and we'll see what the Senate has sent to us. One of our counterparts in the Senate is actually the Senate Fed and State Committee, so they are an exempt committee, so we might be getting some exempt Senate bills sent over here to us. With that, we are adjourned.